During the Cold War, the Soviet Union believed in massive displays of power. Enter the 2B-1 Oka, a mobile nuclear artillery cannon designed in 1957 to rival America's Atomic Annie. This beast featured a jaw-dropping 65-foot-long barrel, firing 420mm nuclear shells weighing 1,650 pounds each, capable of obliterating targets nearly 30 miles away. But this artillery giant had serious flaws. Each shell took 5 minutes to load, and the recoil was so intense it damaged the vehicle with every shot. The chassis cracked, and the gearbox would literally rip from its mountings. It was as if the cannon was at war with itself. Despite its terrifying capabilities, the Oka never entered service. As missile technology advanced, giant cannons like this became obsolete. The program was shelved in the early 1960s, but its existence alone likely caused panic in Western military circles. The Oka remains a symbol of Soviet engineering excess, an enormous machine built more to intimidate than to function. It was never fired in combat, but its presence served as a reminder. When the Soviets dreamed of power, they built it big, sometimes too big. The Soviet Union's obsession with futuristic weaponry reached new heights with the 1K-17 Sadi, a real-life laser tank developed in the 1970s. It didn't fire shells or missiles. Instead, it used 13 laser beams powered through synthetic rubies, each weighing over 60 pounds, to blind enemy optics, disable missile guidance systems, and even blind troops outright. Mounted on a modified tank chassis, the Sadi looked like something from a sci-fi movie. When the lasers pulsed together, they created a focused blast of light strong enough to destroy enemy sensors from a distance. In an age before digital targeting became standard, this was revolutionary and terrifying. But the tank never made it to production. The rubies were incredibly expensive to manufacture, and worse, the weapon violated the Geneva Convention, which bans weapons designed to cause permanent blindness. Using it would have sparked global outrage. With the fall of the USSR in 1991, the laser tank's fate was sealed. It was mothballed before it could see action. Still, the idea of a battlefield laser cannon remains fascinating and unsettling. It was the Soviet Union's answer to futuristic warfare before the future had even arrived. In the early 1930s, the Soviet military launched one of its most ambitious and bizarre aviation experiments, the Zvino project. The goal? To turn a bomber into a flying aircraft carrier. Instead of bombs, these modified bombers carried smaller fighter planes attached to their wings and fuselage. Incredibly, it worked. During flight, the fighters could detach and head into battle, conserving fuel and gaining altitude from the mothership. Some versions of the project even allowed the fighters to redock midair. Each mothership could carry up to 5 fully loaded fighters, creating a swarm of destruction in the skies. The Zvino project saw limited use during the early days of World War II. It offered tactical advantages, like launching surprise airstrikes from distances beyond the fighter's typical range. But as aviation technology rapidly evolved, the project was left behind. Jet-powered fighters soon made the concept obsolete. Despite being phased out, the Zvino project remains a remarkable chapter in military aviation. It was a real-world attempt at something that, to this day, feels straight out of a science fiction novel, a true flying aircraft carrier in the skies. In 1942, Soviet engineer Oleg Antonov attempted one of the most unusual feats in military history, attaching wings to a tank. The result? The Antonov A-40, a tank glider hybrid designed to glide directly into battle zones, land, detach its wings, and immediately begin fighting. The concept was wild but rooted in logic. Traditional tank deployment was slow and dangerous, especially across enemy lines. So, Antonov's idea was to glide lightweight tanks behind a bomber, drop them near the front, and surprise enemy forces. Unfortunately, the A-40 was too heavy. On its first test flight, the towing bomber couldn't handle the drag and had to release the glider early. Miraculously, the tank and its pilot survived the landing, but it was clear the concept was unworkable. The wings added too much resistance, and bombers weren't powerful enough to pull such massive loads. The project was immediately scrapped, but not before making history. Though it failed, the Antonov A-40 was one of the earliest and boldest attempts to combine armor and flight. It's a testament to Soviet creativity. Even if the execution fell flat, the ambition soared. If you've ever wondered what happens when a spider and a helicopter have a baby, look no further than the Me-10. Developed in the late 1950s, this bizarre-looking helicopter was built for heavy lifting, and we mean heavy. Standing nearly 30 feet tall on spindly legs, the Me-10 could carry up to 15 tons of awkward, oversized cargo that wouldn't fit inside normal transport helicopters. It didn't lift cargo inside its body. Instead, it had an open cargo platform beneath its belly. The chopper could land over a load, hook it up, and fly away like a mechanical crane. From trucks and buses to prefabricated buildings, the Me-10 transported it all. It even made appearances at air shows across the globe, showing off its strange but effective design. While not mass-produced, around 55 were built, and a few remained in service well into the 21st century. Though it looked awkward, the Me-10 did its job and did it well. In a world that values sleek fighter jets, this flying crane proved that sometimes form follows function. It was weird, wonderful, and undeniably Soviet. The K-84 Ekaterinburg was a massive nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine launched in 1982. Stretching over 500 feet, it was armed with 2 nuclear reactors and carried 16 nuclear missiles, making it a floating arsenal beneath the sea. But in 2011, this underwater giant nearly caused a catastrophe. While docked for repairs, a welding accident sparked a fire on nearby scaffolding. The blaze quickly spread to the submarine's hull. For over 20 hours, firefighters battled the inferno, while 4 nuclear missiles sat inside. If even one warhead detonated, it could have resulted in a disaster comparable to Chernobyl. Miraculously, the fire was extinguished before any warheads were compromised. But it was a stark reminder of how fragile these weapons platforms really are. The submarine's massive acoustic sonar dome, which resembles something out of a sci-fi movie, was also nearly destroyed. This sonar system helps detect underwater threats by converting sound into visual data, but it was filled with flammable liquid that almost ignited during the fire. Although the Ekaterinburg was eventually repaired, the incident exposed just how close the world came to disaster. It was a floating doomsday machine and a terrifying legacy of Cold War brinkmanship. The M-15 Belfagor, built in Poland under Soviet oversight, might just be the strangest and ugliest airplane ever built. Designed in the 1970s to replace the In-2 biplane as an agricultural aircraft, the M-15 was the first and only jet-powered biplane in the world, and it was a disaster. Instead of a propeller engine, it used a turbojet, a system more suited for high-speed jets than low-altitude farm work. While it could carry 3 tons of pesticides, it guzzled fuel like a fighter plane and had a laughably short range of only 215 nautical miles, half of what the In-2 could do. Repairs were complex, costs were high, and the strange fuselage design made it unsuitable for anything but crop dusting. It was high maintenance, inefficient, and weird-looking, with a bulky body and awkward wing structure that earned it the nickname Belfagor, after a demon. The Soviet bloc had ambitious plans to mass-produce the aircraft, but reality hit hard. Only around 175 were made before production was halted in 1981. The M-15 Belfagor remains a flying oddity, proof that jet engines don't belong in cornfields. The Lewin-class Ekranoplan is perhaps the strangest hybrid vehicle ever created. Designed during the Cold War, it looked like an airplane but behaved more like a ship, flying just above the water using a phenomenon called the ground effect. At 242 feet long with a wingspan of 144 feet, this behemoth could skim across the ocean surface at 340 miles per hour. It was powered by 8 massive turbojet engines and could carry over 100 tons of cargo, or, more alarmingly, 6 nuclear missile launchers mounted on its back. Because it flew so close to the surface, radar systems struggled to detect it, making it a stealthy sea-skimming threat. Its main mission? Attack American aircraft carriers and patrol Soviet waters with speed and firepower. Only one prototype was ever built, entering service in 1987. But when the Soviet Union collapsed just a few years later, the program was abandoned. The lone Lewin was left to rust on the Caspian shore, now a decaying Cold War relic. Strange, terrifying, and revolutionary, the Lewin-class Ekranoplan was a true monster of the deep, but it never got to fight. The Soviet Ikip project is one of the most futuristic aircraft ever conceived, not by aliens but by humans. Developed in 1978, the Ikip looked exactly like a flying saucer. But it wasn't designed for space. It was meant to be an ultra-efficient, all-terrain, all-weather passenger plane. Its elliptical blended wing body created natural lift, and its air cushion landing system meant it could take off from land, water, snow, or swamp. Prototypes suggested it could carry up to 400 passengers, and even their cars, while using only 14 grams of fuel per passenger kilometer, compared to 45 grams used by conventional jets. This appearance was undeniably alien, and it sparked rumors of secret Soviet UFOs. But it was real and far ahead of its time. Plans were in place for multiple variants, including cargo and commercial versions. But like many Soviet projects, it was killed off by the collapse of the USSR in the early 1990s. The program ran out of funding and never truly got off the ground. If the Ikip had succeeded, the future of aviation might have looked very different, with flying saucers instead of standard jets ruling the skies. The Bardini Berev VVA-14 looked like a prop from a Star Wars film, but it was very real. Designed in the 1970s by visionary Italian-Russian engineer Robert Bardini, this amphibious aircraft could take off vertically, land on water, and fly just above ocean waves using the ground effect. Originally intended to hunt U.S. Polaris submarines, it used a combination of jet engines and air cushion lift systems to glide over water at low altitudes. The VVA-14 was also capable of high-altitude flight, reaching up to 33,000 feet, giving it unprecedented versatility. Only 2 prototypes were built. The final version was supposed to include 12 vertical lift engines for full VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, capabilities, but these were never installed. When Bardini died in 1974, the project lost momentum, and development ceased by the late 80s. Its sleek, sci-fi look, paired with its ambitious tech, has made it legendary among aviation enthusiasts. Though it never saw combat or full deployment, the VVA-14 stands as a symbol of what could have been, a machine ahead of its time in both design and vision. The ZVM-2901 might just be the weirdest-looking off-road vehicle the Soviet Union ever built. Instead of wheels or tracks, this experimental machine used 2 massive rotating screw cylinders to dig into terrain and propel itself forward. Originally developed in the 1970s, it combined the body of a UAZ van with enormous aluminum screw drives that allowed it to move across swamps, snow, mud, and even open water. It could tackle terrain that would trap any normal vehicle, essentially making it unstoppable in the harshest Russian environments. But there was a catch. It was painfully slow. Its 152 horsepower engine only reached speeds of 15 miles per hour on land, and just 6 miles per hour in water. While the concept worked, it wasn't practical for modern military needs. Other screw-drive vehicles in history faced the same problem, too slow for real-world use. Though never mass-produced, the ZVM-2901 remains a favorite among collectors and off-road vehicle fans. It's a perfect example of Soviet engineers thinking way outside the box, or, in this case, driving around it in giant spinning screws. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union designed one of the largest aircraft ever conceived, the Kalinin K-7. With a wingspan of 174 feet and 7 massive propeller engines, this experimental bomber was intended to carry troops, vehicles, or over 20 tons of bombs. Its sheer size was unheard of at the time. The aircraft could hold up to 120 passengers and had defensive gun pods mounted on the wings. It was essentially a flying fortress decades ahead of the famous B-52 in scale and ambition. However, during flight testing, the K-7 suffered from severe vibrations and stability issues. On its 7th test flight, tragedy struck. The aircraft crashed, killing 15 crew members. Investigators discovered flaws in the tail design and structural weaknesses that made it unsuitable for further development. The project was canceled, and the prototype was scrapped. Still, the K-7 showcased the USSR's boldness in aviation, building machines far ahead of their time, even if they didn't work out. Its giant frame, futuristic look, and tragic end have cemented its legacy as one of the most fascinating failures in aviation history. Though built before the Soviet era, the the Tsar tank was so enormous and bizarre it deserves a place on this list. Developed during World War I by Imperial Russia, this beast featured 2 front wheels over 30 feet tall and a long tail-like frame that housed a small rear wheel. It was envisioned as a breakthrough tank that could roll over trenches and enemy positions. Armed with cannons and machine guns mounted on top and in side pods, it looked more like a steampunk spider than a battlefield weapon. But the design was deeply flawed. The massive front wheels moved well, but the small rear wheel couldn't handle the weight. During testing, it got stuck in soft ground and never moved again. Engineers couldn't recover it, and it rusted in place for years until scrapped in 1923. Despite its failure, the Tsar tank represents an era of bold experimentation. It was impractical, slow, and impossible to maneuver, but also a symbol of raw ambition. It may never have fought in war, but it still stands as one of the most unforgettable machines ever imagined. The MAZ truck line began in the 1950s in Minsk and quickly evolved into the backbone of Soviet heavy transport. What started with the MAZ 529, a simple single-axle hauler, transformed into a series of gigantic all-terrain trucks capable of moving everything from tanks to nuclear missiles. The MAZ 535 was a military workhorse, 8x8, rugged, and capable of pulling tons of hardware. Then came the MAZ 543, split-cab design, perfect for carrying long ballistic missiles. As Soviet rocket tech grew, so did the trucks. By the 1970s, the MAZ 547 appeared, a 6-axle, 12-wheeled beast with a 62-ton payload capacity. Then came the monstrous MAZ 7904 and MAZ 7907, each over 100 feet long and able to carry 200-ton missiles like the Tselina II. With up to 24 wheels, these trucks were engineering marvels. Their size and power were unmatched, but their time ran out when the Soviet Union collapsed. Many of these megatrucks never left the prototype phase. Still, the MAZ evolution tells a story of ambition on wheels, building machines not just for transport, but to carry the might of a superpower.